Okay, well, good morning and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the morning or afternoon version of the COVID-19 TravelMole interview. And I am delighted today to have someone from the Caribbean, from Puerto Rico, which is one of my favorite Caribbean islands and has been for a very long time. First time I went to Puerto Rico was probably about 20 years ago. And it's always amazed me how Spanish it is. I always expected it to be just American, but it's very Spanish and very Caribbean, and I love it. But I'm delighted to have Brad Dean, who's the big cheese of Puerto Rico tourism. Welcome, Brad.
Hey, saludos from Puerto Rico, Graham. Good to speak with you today.
Muchas gracias, señor. So how are you doing in this lockdown then, Brad? I presume that you're still working. It's probably busier than ever for someone such as yourself.
Yeah, we're doing well here. We've been locked down for a few weeks now, and for us, it was an opportunity to certainly look at how we're going to promote ourselves post-COVID, to work with all of our partners to prepare for travel when it recovers. And as you mentioned, working from home is not easy by any stretch of the imagination. One of the things we decided to do early on is, while not necessarily continuing with the customary type of advertising and sales efforts, but rather to keep Puerto Rico top of mind. So we've been busy trying to promote virtual vacations and live guided tours via Google Earth and other things that allowed us to stay out in front of the consumers, knowing that while you can't travel today, you can still be inspired to travel. And boy, we all want to get back to traveling, don't we?
Indeed. Before we get on to dreaming about going to Puerto Rico, what is the exact status of tourism at Puerto Rico now? Is it an absolute standstill? There's nobody coming, obviously, internationally, but I presume there's nobody coming from the USA either.
Travel has been more or less at a standstill for the last several weeks. Of course, our main airport, San Juan International Airport, is still open and is still receiving flights, but much of that is travel related to core business activities, not necessarily the customary type of leisure travel you would expect. Today, if you arrive at our airport, we are providing voluntary COVID testing. We're doing the thermodynamic temperature scanning just to protect our residents and our visitors. And for those who arrive at the island, whether you're a resident or visitor, the recommendation is to self-quarantine for 14 days. So for the most part, we're running with essential businesses only and seeing a very few number of visitors arrive to the island. And we're hopeful that by the quick, decisive action the government has taken, that this will allow us to emerge quickly and help the travel industry recover far more quickly than some might assume. So travel's more or less at a standstill, but we're ready and eager to get open again.
And how are your stakeholders doing? I mean, what assistance have you been able to give them? What reassurance have you been able to give them?
Yeah, I've been really encouraged to see how our local stakeholders have responded, particularly those small businesses that, of course, find this to be very, very challenging. As you're well aware, Puerto Rico's had its share of adversity in recent years, from earthquakes to hurricanes, from mass political unrest, and now a pandemic. And we had a little bit of experience dealing with a similar situation when the Zika virus hit Puerto Rico several years ago. So the stakeholders are using this downtime to prepare their properties and their staff to reemerge with a whole new set of guidelines and protocols that will ensure that we effectively manage public health. And I think they're also looking at what can they do now to prepare their infrastructure and their businesses to accommodate this new need to better manage the intersection of travel and public health. Everyone is eager to get back up and running, and we're hopeful that over the next few weeks, we'll see a phased reopening of the travel economy. Today, the best we can do is to get prepared by elevating cleanliness, hygiene, and sanitation standards, and do everything we can to be even better prepared as we emerge out of the COVID crisis and into the post-COVID travel recovery.
Now, you mentioned earlier some health checks before you arrive in the island, and also that currently one would have to go into a 14-day quarantine should one arrive on the island. I presume that's aimed for everybody, even if they're from, say, coming from New York. Do you have any feeling for how that will pan out with regard to international travel when it eventually returns?
Yeah, I think what we're all talking about now is post-COVID, pre-vaccine. And for that time frame, which of course we hope doesn't last any longer than absolutely necessary, we anticipate some tighter controls than we would otherwise have had at the airport. The thermodynamic temperature scanning is certainly one step in that direction. Providing testing at the airport right now, which is voluntary, helps us to not only protect residents and visitors, but also to help travelers be mindful of what they need to do. And we see those types of protocols continuing in some form or fashion. Of course, Puerto Rico is part of the United States, so we'll adhere to all of the US guidelines and protocols. But as you know, Graham, it's not just about getting to the island and coming through the airport. What we have to do as an industry is better manage the safety and security and public health standards and the standards of care throughout the entire travel continuum. And I think that's one of the challenges for our industry, is to figure out how we can best protect our employees, our residents, and our visitors throughout the entire travel experience, but yet you still want to deliver the level of hospitality and the warmth and good giving nature of the people of Puerto Rico that travelers have come to expect. And I think that balance is going to be part of this new normal that we all keep talking about.
Now, the cruise industry is obviously a major part of the tourism makeup for Puerto Rico. Have you had detailed discussions with the cruise lines so far? Do you get a feel for that? Because they appear to be almost the pariahs of the travel industry at the moment as far as COVID-19 is concerned, and some are saying that it's going to take until at least a year before they really get back. Is that something you're budgeting for, or what's your feeling on cruise at the moment in terms of contribution to a Puerto Rican tourism pot?
Yeah, you know, Graham, you make a really good point. The cruise passenger has been an important part of Puerto Rico's visitor economy for a number of years, especially when you consider the number of cruises that home port out of Puerto Rico, which provides an important contribution to the number of seats that the airlines sell. We're optimistic that the cruise lines are addressing this very, very proactively. As you mentioned, they've got a big hill to climb. And we're encouraged by the initial numbers we're seeing of traditional cruise passengers who are willing to come back and cruise, but albeit with some changes in plans, itineraries, and of course, protocols. One of the things we do expect for the cruise passengers coming out of the United States is they'll probably be a little more inclined to domestic cruising, as opposed to seeing a lot of foreign countries where the standards of care and protocols may or may not be at the common level that most are looking for. And we do expect that certainly this is going to take some time. But you know, the cruise industry has always proven to be a resilient industry. And based on the conversations we're having and from what's been shared with us, they are certainly taking this very seriously. I think no industry understands any better than the cruise lines the importance of elevating and expanding the standards of care, so that you and I as travelers know that when we board that ship, that we're safe, secure, and that our loved ones as well as ourselves are protected. They're going to have to go a little farther than maybe other industries will, but they seem well prepared to do so.
Now, you obviously have a good handle on what is needed to be done in terms of health, safety, particularly personal safety, because those are the elements that most people are saying, well, unless I know it's safe, I'm not going to go there. You obviously have a handle on that. The next challenge, of course, is to get that message across so that brand Puerto Rico, Discover Puerto Rico, is immediately associated with not only quality of holiday, but in this post-COVID pre-inoculation time that we're talking about, it needs to be one of personal safety, and you need to get that message across. You said you've been having discussions, you've been having thoughts about how that may best be done. That normally involves money, it involves marketing, it involves getting the message out as well as PR. Do you think that you will have the money to do it? Do you think the Puerto Rican and the federal government will dig even deeper into their pockets to help you on this one?
Yeah, I think we're all in this together, and certainly are going to have to invest heavily in marketing coming out of this one. But you know, the good news on this, Graham, is, as you say, we're all facing the same circumstances. And so initially, some of our discussions with meeting planners and travel advisors has revealed to us that when everybody's in it together, it makes it a little easier to unveil the kinds of plans and tactics that are going to be needed to bring ourselves out of this and to shorten the recovery cycle. Already we're seeing some very productive conversations in the United States Congress and also at the local government level about what it's going to take to revive the tourism industry. And I think one of the things that's interesting, certainly in the US and I suspect in other parts of the world, is that if you're not in the travel industry, it's easy to take this industry for granted. Not only does it create an extraordinary amount of economic output and jobs, but travel is good for the soul. You know, travel makes you healthier, makes you happier. Travel spreads joy. Travel connects people, and travel enables us to accomplish things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to accomplish alone. And many of us who are adapting to these Zoom calls and working from home are realizing just how important travel is to the psyche of the consumer, not to mention our global economy. And so our hope is that with a little taste of what this world is like without travel, that's going to help everyone, policymakers as well as the private sector, unite and resolve to do what's necessary to shorten the recovery cycle and get travel back up to speed. And part of that, of course, is the marketing, not only destination marketing, but being able to influence consumers and meeting planners that we are ready and prepared to protect the safety and health of travelers and employees. And that's going to be incredibly important, the price of admission, if you will, to post-COVID travel recovery.
That's very good. Now, in your marketing considerations about pushing out that Puerto Rico is a safe and healthy place to visit, brand Caribbean seems to have come out, or seems to be coming out of this COVID crisis with an enhanced reputation. Most of the islands have handled COVID extremely well. There are very few fatalities, even very few cases, and in some cases, like the smaller islands, there's no evidence of coronavirus even being there. Is part of your consideration, even though you're you're part of the USA, if you like, have you considered associating yourself more with the Caribbean than the USA, because the Caribbean is probably going to come out with this with a better reputation of how they handled coronavirus than the USA or the UK for that matter?
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting question that really isn't new to us over the last couple of years as we've evolved as the primary destination marketer for the island of Puerto Rico. We've always found the double benefit. There are benefits to being part of the United States, but clearly there are benefits to being identified as part of the Caribbean, which is arguably one of, if not the most powerful, unpaid brands in the travel space when you think of the Caribbean overall. And while oftentimes we're quick to point out the disadvantages or challenges of being an island, this is one of those times when it's actually an advantage to be the island. Unlike a lot of destinations where most of your traffic is coming in by automobiles or other types of vehicles, here in the island right now, the only way you're going to get here is one place, and that's through our airport. So it gives us a single point of entry and exit, and therefore a little simpler platform to control in terms of limiting the spread of infectious diseases. And we're hopeful that that will certainly enable us to position Puerto Rico as a safe haven, not only for the United States, but for travelers throughout the world. In fact, there's a very robust discussion taking place currently on our island about how to create a bit of a biological barrier, if you will, not only through testing at the airport, but effective high-tech contact tracing and other means that will allow us to limit the spread of not only COVID, but future infectious diseases. So as you point out, the Caribbean has been largely unscathed relative to other markets in the US and throughout the world. We're hopeful that that will give us an advantage coming out of this. And boy, we certainly need it. When you think of what the Caribbean has had to deal with in recent years, particularly with massive hurricanes, we'd like to be able to see the second half of 2020 begin to reemerge, and hopefully sooner rather than later, travel gets back to the pre-COVID normal that we all desire.
Yeah, I think contact tracing in an island community obviously makes sense, because you've got a fairly fixed population of people arriving should, maybe be forced to download the app or whatever. And I know there's experimentation going on across the world, including here in the UK with island communities. Final question, do you think that in this post-COVID world, once it's all over, really, even in this interim twilight zone between now and a vaccine, do you think that we will have a better travel industry rather than necessarily a bigger one? And by that, I mean, people may be more appreciative of culture. They may be more appreciative of all sorts of things in travel itself, because once that's denied you, then obviously you're going to be missing it more so. And I can't think of many things that would be better than to be in San Juan on an evening having mofongo and a couple of beers and listening to all sorts of things going on in the street, which is, to me, is the heart of Puerto Rico. When I've been there, I just think it's fantastic. Do you think people would be more appreciative of that, or do you think people would just, big deal, it's over, let's carry on?
No, I don't think we go back to the normal that we knew before. Of course, some parts of travel will always remain important, and that is what you mentioned, the fact that travel is a force for good, and it connects people. It allows us to not only experience other cultures, but celebrate them as well. There's a famous movie, very popular in the United States, called It's a Wonderful Life. You can hardly miss it if you're anywhere near a television set during the holiday season. And in that story, the main character, who's approaching a midlife crisis, gets to see what the world would have been like had he never lived. And he realized that what he thought was a boring, mundane, underachieving life was actually an exceptional life that saved lives, made the community stronger, and created a lot of jobs and successful businesses. I think we're all having that It's a Wonderful Life moment right now with the travel industry. We're getting to see what the world is like without travel, and frankly, it's not a pretty sight. And so my hope is that coming out of this, that we'll have a greater appreciation for the social and emotional impacts of travel, not to mention the huge economic impact. But Graham, it starts with our industry first. And so we have to think differently about how we promote ourselves and how we deliver experiences in the post-COVID world. So the business models that depended heavily upon cramming as many people as you could into a small space aren't going to be nearly as lucrative or as successful as they might have appeared to have been before. And while a lot of us were a lot more focused on over-tourism a few weeks ago than we are now and will be for the foreseeable future, the fact of the matter is that we as an industry now have to take ownership and really embrace the responsibility of managing this intersection between public health and travel. And if we do that and demonstrate the standards of care that are necessary, then I think we can get back to the days when travel is a robust, healthy industry. It'll change, but it'll change for the better. And we do know this. When you travel, you're healthier, you're happier. It connects you to people and cultures that you wouldn't otherwise be connected to. We want to get back to those days, but we're going to have to endure some challenges in the interim. But I'm confident that with the industry's history and the resiliency of travel and tourism, that we're going to see better days lie ahead, hopefully in the not too distant future.
Good, Brad, thank you very much. Every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings, I think. It's a wonderful life. I hope that Discover Puerto Rico get their rewards sooner rather than later. And I thank you for your time. And as I said, I hope to have a couple of beers with you in San Juan sooner rather than later.
Well, hopefully there'll be a plate of mofongo waiting on you on your next trip.
Good man. Thanks very much.
Thank you.